Is taken from the Greek word theo, means not God, but religious. Theophany, a divine, let's say. Phany is the theophany was a divine experience, let's say, at Har Sinai. So it's called Theophany, and like I said, it's primarily so that people could be confused about what that is and open up and listen, hear what it says. Ma'amad Har Sinai, it is, after all, just a few days before Shavuot. It is fitting that in the holiday in which we mark the anniversary of the giving or of the Aseret HaDibrot, or the pronouncement of the Aseret HaDibrot, that we should get into a little more details about the Aseret HaDibrot, which is what my plan is here. Oh, this is even better. And as I often tell you, the whole point of all of these lectures is to open up ideas and thoughts that we didn't know before, that we thought we knew, and that the text sometimes says a little differently than what we thought it was. And here it is. I need it to be higher, excuse me. And therefore, come on. Oh, that's why. I'm sorry. I was going to do that next. Oh, pleasure. There. And for that reason, this class, this shiur, is going to address exactly that. What do we know about the Aseret HaDibrot, and what do we think we knew about the Aseret HaDibrot? Hopefully, certain ideas will come to realization, and maybe we'll learn something a little different than we had known before. All right? First of all, I am going to announce that which was mentioned in the other classes. The shiurim today were sponsored by Estelle Harris. In memory of her husband, Richard Mark Harris. It's Raphael Meir ben Tzvi Hirsch, a loving father and grandfather. I don't know how many people today could say more than that, but I knew these. I know very well Estelle, and I knew her husband. In the beginning of my rabbinate, after our first year in Cincinnati, 1972. So in 1973, I moved to Trenton, New Jersey. And there, one of the people there, actually, Estelle's father was a head of the board, he was of the shul, and Phillips themselves. And I therefore knew Estelle and her husband. And so I feel honored to be able to say something and to at least tell her that that we are basically getting the honor of being able to fill a shiur now in memory of Estelle's husband, Raphael Meir ben Tzvi Hirsch, who, as I said, I did know. I'm not going to begin by reading to you the Aseret HaDibrot, because you're somewhat knowledgeable of them, the Ten Commandments, we call them, and it's very well known to both Jew and non-Jew, those who know the Bible at all, as they call it. And I'm going to begin by simply understanding the ABC of this. The Ten Commandments. So let's understand it. First, I'm going to address the fact that the Aser HaDibrot are found not once but twice in the Torah. It's found in Parshat Yitro, which is what we're going to be reading, please God, on Shavuot, on Monday. And also in Aser HaDibrot is found also in Va'et Hanan. The Aser HaDibrot are part of the history of Israel's journey through the Midbar, Sinai, until they reach it. And there's a difference between the two of them, and we would eventually get through those differences. Sometimes they're very, very minor. If it says, for example, in Yitro, it says Lo ta'aseh lecha pesel kol temuna, and in the Aser HaDibrot it says Lo ta'aseh lecha pesel v'chol temuna. Kol v'chol, not big differences. Shamor Yom HaShabbat, Zachor Yom HaShabbat, also differences. But when it comes to, for example, why we observe Shabbat, there are tremendous differences between the two. Why there are differences is something we will get to. I don't think we're going to do it completely. But I think just as an looking over the whole thing, an overview, if I say, of the two, the differences, you should know that these two versions of the Aser HaDibrot are not two Ten Commandments. Sometimes we see Mefarshim trying to wonder, well, why did he change that? Well, why did it really say? And so on and so forth. The idea that Sefer Devarim, in which we find the second version of the Aser HaDibrot, was, after all, a retelling of the Torah of what had happened. And therefore we get into trouble if the Dvarim is merely retelling. Why does it retell it differently? But that's a misconception. That's simply not what Dvarim is about. And quickly I'm going to go through this because it ties into understanding the Aser HaDibrot and why there's two of them. That is just the first part of what I want to say. And that is to understand what Sefer Devarim is. Sefer Devarim is not a Mishneh Torah, which means a repetition of the Torah. That's not what it means. It's not a repetition of the Torah because the Torah has 5 books. It has the book of Bereshit. What part of Bereshit in the story of Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Yosef and how much of that is repeated in Devarim? And you're right, none. Or we can go into Sefer Shemot. Okay, good. There you have the slavery of Egypt, the enslavement of the Bnei Israel, the birth of Moshe, what happened to Moshe with Yitro, when he had to run away, what he did, all of the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea, and guess what? None of them is found in Sefer Devarim. So, as a book that was supposedly a retelling of the Torah, that's not true. All of Bereshit is not there. A good bulk, the majority of Shemot is not there. Yes, it does recall mentions at least the sin of the Chet HaEgel, which we studied last week, and it does include the Aser HaDibrot, but the story of Yitro is not even mentioned here. Although in Perek Aleph, it's sort of hinted to, although we don't know which story, whether it is the establishment of the elders or of the judges, which is the time of Yitro, but it's not mentioned, not his name at all. All of the whole last part, except for the Parah Adumah, the last part of Sefer Shemot, which is all about the building of the Mishkan, all the details about it, and everything in Truma and Titzaveh and parts of Kitisa and all of Ayakel and all of Pekude is not found in Dvarim. So far, Bereshit is missing. Almost all of Shmot, except the 2-3 stories, is missing. So Vayikra undoubtedly will, be put in this repetition of the Torah and all the laws. Now, the stories of Tuma and Tahara, the whole concept of purity and defilement, all the sacrifice rituals, what has to be cleansed, where they are, where it has to be slaughtered, and where the blood has to be, all of that stuff is in Vayikra. It's not in Dvarim. Don't find that in Dvarim. The story of Yovel that we just read last week in Bahar, that is the Jubilee year, not mentioned. Not mentioned in Dvarim. And even Shemitah, the concept of the sabbatical year, is not mentioned in Devarim. It's mentioned as where, and for the first time and only time, where all debts are also Shemitah during the 7th year. But the idea of not working in the fields, which we always speak about when it comes to Shemitah, is not found in Devarim. Okay, so now we got nothing that's in Bereshit, very little that's in the story is in Shmot, almost nothing that is in Vayikra. So finally it comes to Bamidbar. Great, so we'll talk about that. Good. So Bamidbar begins, and you'll find all the census, all of the countings of the people of Levi. That's the whole Sefer. The whole Parsha of Bamidbar. Then Naso comes, tells us what the Leviim had to do, what they did in the Mishkan, and that's not there at all either. Comes to Bahalotcha, the entire Parsha of Bahalotcha is not mentioned in Devarim. That doesn't mention at all the sins that we go through there and so on and so forth. First time we have anything about Sefer that we learn in and we read in Sefer Bamidbar is the story of the spies. And we'll get to that too another time. So that is mentioned in Dvarim. Okay, then we go to the story of Korach. Not there. The story of Balak. Not there. In Parshat Pinchas, all of the additional sacrifices, the Korbanot Musaf, not there. So this whole concept that, Mishnah Torah, they're reviewing the Torah, that's not true. Hardly anything about the Torah is reviewed. The idea, the concept of Mishneh Torah was Moshe teaching some new or some actually repeated laws that were taught. And sometimes there were laws that were taught over the 40 years, but here, Dvarim, in the 40th year, Moshe writes it down and reminds them. We think it's the first time we're reading it. It's not true. Moshe had been teaching it for the whole time. It wasn't written down in this part, but he makes sure to write it down in Dvarim. So therefore, it's going over the laws before what? Before they enter Eretz Yisrael. And who's not going to be there? Moshe. And who wasn't there when they got the Torah? And that's Aseret Dibrot. The bulk of the people. They all died out. This is the 40th year. When you understand that historical thing, that the bulk of the population that was there were not around, not only in the Aseret Dibrot, but in Egypt. They didn't know about they heard about them, Papa told me about this, but they weren't there. So it's understandable that what Moshe was going to do is remind them of the things that did happen, but not the details that we already had, but those things that are going to impact the mitzvot that they have to review and have to follow. Okay. Understanding this, you understand now also that the Aseret HaDibrot that we have in Va'et Hanan, that we said, oh, it's the second version. It's not the second version. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't planning to tell you, this is what was said. Not true. Because it was never meant to be an exact duplication of what was written in Parshat Yitro. In fact, whereas in Yitro it says, Vaydaber, that Moshe spoke, Hasbarim ha'eleh, God spoke these words. He spoke these words, Yaser HaDibrot. But in Vayet Hanan, it says, and God spoke Kadevarim ha'eleh. Something like these. It wasn't meant to be exactly the same thing, and it wasn't. So, just like the stories in Devarim were not meant to be duplicates of the ones in the earlier books, and most of them are not even included, the only reason that there's Aseret HaDibrot is not because to repeat them, but to, as I just said, remind the people who are never there. This is what God said. I know your parents told you, I was there, said Moshe. I'll tell you exactly what he said. I was up in the mountain. I heard God's voice. And most crucially, and most people don't understand this, it's so important. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them the mitzvot. That's what Devarim was about. And that is precisely the purpose of Sefer Devarim. Moshe reviewing the mitzvot that he had already been teaching there for 40 years. And one would imagine that some mechutzav among the 2 million people, 3 million people, and Jews have a habit of having maybe one or two who may speak out when they shouldn't. I know, I've taught for 50 years, believe me. Who is going to say, if not openly, imagine to himself, so if God taught us all of these mitzvot, Moshe, why are you telling us? Moshe, why are you telling us? Why doesn't God, and why didn't he at Har Sinai get up there and say, okay, number 345 mitzvah is this. 610, this is the mitzvah. Why is it that he gets 10 pronouncements, right? And nothing else?
Well,
why? So why?
Not to speak.
Excellent, very good. And where do we find that? We find that in Shema, but we find that in this story. The story that's told here in Va'et Hanan, there in Va'et Hanan, is not told in detail in Shemot. Because here we see in Va'et Hanan exactly what was said. And that is Va'ata. Okay. He said, Va'ata lama namut. The people came to him after they heard the sound of God. They were very frightened. Was that after the first two dibrot, as Chazal say, and Gemara says, or as the text seems to do it, all 10. Either way, when they heard that, they were frightened and they trembled, and they said, "We don't want to hear this." They said, "Lama namot." He said, "Why should we have to die by sitting there and by standing here and listening to God's voice? Krav ata ushama. Please, Moshe, you go up to God and you listen to him. Et kol asher yomar Hashem Elokeinu. Whatever God tells you, ve'at tidaber eleinu. And you can then tell us what God has taught you, everything he said, v'shamanu v'asinu. And we'll listen to whatever you say, and we'll do it. That's easy. Na'aseh v'nishma. That was the point. And that's exactly why Moshe has anything about the Aseret HaDibrot in Va'et Hanan. It wasn't because he wanted to tell, this is one, this is two. But because at Ma'amad Har Sinai, at that Theophany, you didn't want to hear God's law. God's plan was to give you the mitzvah. There's certainly all 10 of them, but probably all of them. You could not stand in that, not in a negative way, but rather in a real way, you could not be able to listen to God. And you said, please, and what did you say? Moshe, you teach us. So that's why before he starts teaching them the mitzvot and all of the Dvarim, he now explains to them, in case you're going to say, hey, what happened to God? How come you're taking over? He's saying, he would have, but you asked me. It was your request for me and of God that he not speak, and that I listen to him and I would speak to you and teach you. So the reason that I'm teaching you these mitzvot and God doesn't come and do so is not because of me, it's because of you. You wanted that. So now that he said that, he now can go on, and you'll see, goes on to start to tell what the mitzvot are. But that was an introduction to Dvarim. And now you understand Dvarim far better. The whole thing wasn't to retell stories. He wanted to explain to them why it is that he now had to give the mitzvah. He had to review them, those he had been teaching them, and in case they say, how come God didn't teach us? Maybe you're just making it up. He said, because you didn't want to hear, and you asked me to do it. It's a phenomenally important thing in understanding all of Sefer Devarim, but also in realizing that Israel, whether consciously or not, started the concept of teacher and student, of having to pass down what we would call the Masorah from one generation to the other. You speak to one, and you speak to the next. And that's how, hello, we're still here 3,000 years later studying the same Aseret HaDibrot, because our generations, like Moshe to the people, taught down and down. And that is. All right, so it's a good introduction, even though it was about the Aseret HaDibrot, it was about really all of Dvarim. And now let's find if we can clarify a few things about the Aseret HaDibrot. So let's now, question number one. Why do we think there are 10 Dibrot? Why are there 10 Dibrot? Why aren't there 11 or 12 or maybe 8 or 9? Well, why 10?
It's an even number.
Even number. It could have been like eggs. Could have had a dozen of them. Yeah.
10 fingers.
Oh, 10 fingers. That's why. And if it could have 20 because they could have taken. They're wearing sandals. They could have counted on their toes too, right? Mm-hmm. And then the term of Dibrot, right? Commandments. If we accept that there are 10, and we'll show you why we have to accept that. Which are the 10? If I would have you read through the text, and I think I gave you the Aseret HaDibrot, that whole sheet of the 10 commandments, and if I would ask you, how many commandments do you find in there? I think you'd be surprised, okay? We say 10 commandments. Let's see, and I have where it says the Yitro version. It's not in English, but we begin with, for example, well, I'll take that aside. We'll do that in a second. And again, Dibrot, as I said, are Dibrot commandments? No. Okay. Well, exactly. What would you say if you say 10 commandments? You'd say Aseret what?
Utterances spoken.
No, how do you say it if it was commandments? What's command?
Well, it's a directive.
In Hebrew, what is a commandment?
A dibrot, diber.
No, you're doing dibrot. Dibrot isn't. How do you say, I want you to do this? Close. I want you to do this. Mitzvah. It would be Aseret HaMitzvot. Correct. That's not what it says. It is called Dibrot. And you correctly pointed out that its source is from the Daber. So it doesn't mean 10 commandments. It means 10 pronouncements. You are correct. Dibra, whatever you want to say it. So I sort of solved that reason why I said Dibra. But why do do we think it's 10 commandments? I'll show you that there are a lot more than that in this thing. So why do we say 10 commandments? It means we had no choice. Because the Torah calls it that. We find it in, I'm trying to see if I have it here in my source sheets. I don't have it here. I should have it here. In the source sheets where you see it. Please have here.
2 or 3 could fit into one category?
But it's more than one command.
I'm saying.
But it's still one
If 3 fit into one category, then there's...
We'll find that that's true, by the way, but still. All right, good. I didn't have it here. I didn't do a very good job when I wanted to. Okay, anyway, you have, for example, we find that it says, not once, not twice, but 3 times in the Torah, it says, Vayihi Sham Em Hashem, that Moshe stayed in Har Sinai with God, and it says he didn't eat, didn't drink, all right? Vayichtov al haluchot et divrei habrit, and he wrote down the words of the covenant that God made them. Aseret hadvarim, 10 devarim.
Number 4.
So there it's 10, not 14. So it says 10, and then it says Vayichtov al Rishon again, that Moshe wrote down, as were in the first tablets. Aseret hadvarim, the 10 things, 10 pronouncements, we'll call them, right? And then we have it even a third time, where it says that God spoke to them. Again, this is in Chanan, actually in Devarim. You heard God's voice, but you didn't see God, and God told you to them about the brit that you are tied to, that He told you to from Aseret Hadvarim, the 10 things. So 3 times in the Torah, we see that this, what we call the Aseret Hadibrot, had to be Aseret because it says Aseret. That's how we know it's 10. So we took care of that question. Now, I could go through, and I may have to, if you look quickly at how many mitzvot we have in the Aseret Hadibrot, and we see clearly it's not 10 commandments. Let's stop. Well, I'm going to put that aside, unless, do you see here on that first part of the Aseret Hadibrot that you see on the right side of the page of the Yitro, count how many, what we say, breaks there are as the Torah would write it. See how many spaces there are. Count. There's 1 after Mitzvotai, 2 after Shav, 3 after Vayikadeshehu, then 4 before Lo Tirtzah, number 5 before Lo Tin'af, number 6 before Lo Tigno, number 7 before Lo Ta'aneh, 8 and 9 before Lo Tachmod, 9 after that Lo Tachmod again, and then 10 at the end. So by the very breaking pauses found and written in the Torah also indicate that there are 10. God saw it as 10 Dvarim, which is interesting. If not only, it's not something for sure, because for sure we know because it says it in the Torah, but it's even written that way. But what I wanted to look for is mitzvot. When you talk about the Aseret Hadibrot, we always mistakenly say the 10 commandments. It's not. We say it's not commandments, it's Dibrot pronouncements. And it's not really, and it's 10 because it says so. But it's not 10 commandments. I'm going to start with the first one. Okay? Let's go to, I would say the other side, but I don't have it inside. The last part of the Aseret Hadibrot are things you shouldn't do, or what we call lavin, all things thou shalt nots. You know the old story that when Moshe shattered the lichot at Har Sinai, the joke goes that when it broke in half, the people of the world came running around. They grabbed the broken pieces, and the Jews also did. the Jews ended up getting all of the low, and everybody else said tirtzach, tirav, tinav, tigzol, and everything over there. It's a joke. But it is something that it says at the end there you have obviously 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 basically. So it says lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignov, lo ta'aneh, and lo tachmod, which is indul. Those 5. So those are 5 mitzvot. No problem. But look at the first 5. There, it's more of a positive thing, although it has some very interesting. Are there any what you cannot do in the first 5? Look at the first 5. You see in lines 1 through 22, let's say. It's really to 24. But how many times do you see any you shall not do something? Huh? What did you? I can't hear. What?
No, there's one.
1, really? Let's go. Lo yihiyeh lecha, 1. Lo ta'aseh lecha is 2, right? Lo tishtachav elahem, 3. Lo ta'ovneim, 4. Next, lo tisa et shem Hashem Elokecha, 5, right? Zachor Yom HaShabbat, so it says there, lo ta'aseh kol melacha, right? 6 lows are found here in the first part. So I have 6 over there. So right away I have 6 more lavin, 6 negative mitzvot beyond the 5 that are negative in the end. That's 11, and I haven't started the positive ones yet. So already we are more than 10. So let's see. What is the first command that we have here again? It's not in English, but what is that? Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the first words. It says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, Asher Hotzeiticha Me'eretz Yisrael Mibeit Avadim, who took you out of the land of Egypt from enslavement in the house of slaves. That's the first mitzvah, right? Good. What's the command?
To acknowledge. Hello? Acknowledge.
Oh, so it says, thou shalt acknowledge that I am Hashem, your God.
Right.
Oh, makes sense. Very good.
And
And that is exactly what Rashi says. The other traditionalists say that. And it's certainly logical. It's only one problem. It doesn't say that.
I know.
Why it doesn't say, Yadoa Teda, Ki Anochi Hashem Elokecha, thou shalt know that I am your God. It doesn't say that. Hamein Ta'aminu, thou shalt believe and know that I am God. It doesn't say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Is this a mitzvah or not? There is a whole.
Command someone to acknowledge that's free choice.
Can you command you to love God? Be'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, that's a command.
It's a machloket.
Huh? Good. There is a machloket. There's a difference. There is an argument between the commentators, Parshanim, Mefarshim, whatever, as to whether that's a mitzvah or not. The Abarbanel says it's not.
Which one? The first?
The first. Because every other one has some sort of command.
Yes.
You shall and you shall not. This doesn't say nothing.
But what about free choice? How could free choice?
That has nothing to do with it. Is this a command? That's all I'm saying you.
You're saying it's not.
I'm not saying that. It's the Abarbanel and other Mefarshim. It's not completely agreed.
Isn't it a commitment to acknowledge and therefore accept?
How about this? Okay? There are those, exactly what you say. That's what Rashi says. How about think of it this way? The people have left Egypt. They had seen 10 plagues. They had seen the Egyptians destroyed. They've seen the Red Sea split. And now they also saw victory at Amalek, right, against the Amalekites. Moshe showed his hands up, right? They saw the manna coming down, manna in the morning, manna in the evening, manna at supper time. There's manna every single time, twice a day. They had manna every single day. Every morning it came there. It came down from God because they complained they wanted. They even had some meat that God sent with the slav. And now they come to Har Sinai. And God says, I know you haven't seen me, but all of those miracles? Anochi Hashem, I'm the one who took you I'm the one who did all these miracles for you. So be aware of that. If I'm about to give you mitzvot that you have to follow, you have to know it's me who's telling you that. You have to know that I'm the one who has done this for you. And as a result of that, you are obligated to listen to what I've said. No, I asked you, if that's a command. And the point is, there's no word of command. You know what this is? And it makes so much sense. It's an introduction. Hi, I'm God. I do all these good things to you. Now listen to me. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. That first thing is not, many believe, not a mitzvah at all. It's merely an introduction to the mitzvah. And you know what's interesting about that? Again, if you look at the text, do you find that there's any break between the first two lines where it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha? Is there a break to start, Lo Yiheh Lecha? Is there? No. And yet, at the beginning of every other command, there is a break. There is none here. So is that possibly a hint? Now, this is not a command, it merely is an introduction to that first command. So that's very interesting. And that's something that we wouldn't ordinarily know. But I want you to, whether it's Rashi who says it's commanded, as most people think, you correctly said, you must believe that I am Hashem Elokecha, and that's why it is an unspoken command. Or, as others say, there's no command here at all because it doesn't say anything about him to do that. But rather, it's an introduction to let them know that this booming voice that's suddenly coming out of the heavens is not somebody with a good PA system. It is God who has just done all of these for you, these miracles for you and saved your life. And therefore, that's why you should be listening to don't do this, but do that, and so on and so forth. Very interesting. Good. So now, we are going to go through the like I said, the 6 loaves that I went through in the first slide, and there are 5, but one of them but 2 are found in the last one. So there are 6 loaves in the last Chabad. There's a separation. It's interesting. What are the first 6? How are they different from the other 6? Well, primarily, when the first 6 refer to the relationship of whom to whom.
Between us and God.
Very good. Between us and God. The second 6 do not murder, right? Do not commit adultery. Do not steal or kidnap, if you wish. Do not stand a false witness against another, and do not covet another's wife or any reshut, any possessions that he has. So that's the 6 here and 6 there. Of course, there's one that's problematic. Which one do you think? We're saying the first part is all between between man and God, and less always between man and man, person and person, right? Which one do you think doesn't really fit comfortably into that seduction? Huh? Right. Say it loud. You're right. thou shalt respect your parents. Would that not be properly in this section that says between one and another? Not against to God, but rather one and another. That makes sense, right? And yet it's not. It's not. It's there at the last of the between God and man, between man and God. It's a curious thing. Why is that?
Why?
I wonder why.
The foundation of respecting God is respecting your parents. So if you
Okay.
don't teach your child to respect their parents, they certainly won't respect them.
I think that's a very, very good answer. I would have put it a different way around. And that would be, if you're not prepared, if you don't show respect to your parents, it's as if you are not showing respect to God. That there is a connection between your relationship to your parents. It's as sanctified as your relationship to God himself. Chazal say it over and over again, that within a relationship, there are not two partners, but three. There is man, woman, and God. The famous thing, I think, is Rabbi Meir, who said that Ish and Isha. What's the difference in Hebrew between Ish and Isha? The Yud and the Hey, which is the name of God. God is in that. And what does he say? If there's no God, no Yud and Hey in the relationship, all you're left with is what? Aleph Shin is what?
Emet and Sheker.
Esh.
Or Emet and
Fire.
Sheker.
If God is not found in a relationship of Ish and Isha, all you're going to have is fire. It's consumed. The relationship will be consumed. Will be burned out. Magnificent way Chazal see it. They're pretty smart. They come up with these fantastic things, and it's so true. So that's why it's in the last one. The fact that we have 6 and 6 here is also very interesting. And I heard this from Rabbi Yoel Ben Nun, who said, what things in the Torah that we know are divided with 6 and 6? Certain things might be hard for you to know. Other things you might know. 6 and 6, that's 12. What's 12? Anything that...
The loaves.
Excellent! Excellent! Terrific. The loaves, the chalot, that's correct. And the...
Tribes, he said.
Right, well, that's the other one, 12 tribes. Very good. That's what it says. It says, it's in Emor at the end there. It says that you have to take the solet, you have to prepare the 12 chalot of right, the 12 chalot of the lechem.
Mishnah.
No, not lechem, Mishnah, no. So, huh?
Lechem apanim.
Very good. Lechem apanim is correct. And how would they divide it up?
Well, they had 12.
They had 12, but not 12 in a pile. They had 6 and 6.
Okay.
Very good. When the tribes had to stand at Har Grizim and Har Eval, 12 tribes, how would they divide it up? 6 and 6. 6 at Har Grizim, 6 at Har Eval, correct? The other thing is when you talk about the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, there you have Shisha, you have 6 on one and 6 is on. It says, Shisha mishmotam al ha'even ha'achat ve'et Shisha hanotarim al ha'even ha'asheni kitolatam. 6 of the tribes' names are found on one of the stones, and the other stones are the other 6. So we see there the 6 and 6 is not simply, I'm going to have something different, The Aseret HaDibrot also have a 6 and 6. It's a little more subtle than what we read about splitting up the lechem hapanim and the tribes at Har Gerizim and Har Eval. It's never really commanded in the Aser HaDibrot. Kadosh Baruch Hu never said Moshe when he had to inscribe it himself. He said, he doesn't tell him, okay, Moshe, put 6 on this side and 6 on the other. Right, he doesn't command that at all. So it's a little more subtle. But clearly it is divided that way, which is interesting. One, societal laws, societal mores, right? And those are more like religious ordinances. Now, what's also interesting, and I'm looking at this, is just things that when you read, don't just read, give a look at what it is. You'll notice that the first 5 have, almost all 5 of them, have differences, they have explanations. Why, for example, or what might happen. The last 5, so they say, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. But the first 4 or 5, if you want to start with the lo yihielecha as they do, why should you not have another God? Ki anochi Hashem Elokecha ke'elkana. Because I am I can say vengeful, but I think zealous is a much better word, meaning not easily forgiving. And so that's one, because I will punish you. Then lo tisa Hashem, it says lo tisa, don't take God's name in vain. There too, there's a reason. It says ki lo yinakeh Hashem, God is not going to forgive those who take His name in vain. Then we have, it says about the Shabbat, right? Why do we have to have Shabbat? What does it say there in Yitro, not in Ba'et Hanan? What reason does it say in Yitro? Why do we have to have Shabbat? Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Because God is the creator. And therefore, He stopped the creation process on Shabbat, so shall you. And then even kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, even though we seem to be, so to say, seesawing between man and God and man and man, the reasoning is certainly has God in here, because if you do show respect to your parents, it says l'man ya'arichun yamecha, so that you will have a longer life. Who can guarantee and ensure a longer life? Just God. So you see how He's involved there. So it's very simply. And in fact, how do they refer to God, right? It says, Hashem Elokecha, right? Loton ki anochi Hashem Elokecha. And then it says, Lo tiyusad Shem Hashem Elokecha. Then it says, Yom HaShvi Shabbat L'Hashem Elokecha. And it says, Kabed et avicha, because Allah Adama Asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach. Each time, and each of these dibrot, 5 times it says, Hashem Elokecha. God, your God. It's fascinating. It doesn't say that, however, on the second 5, where it just says, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. Why not?
Because God doesn't have to repeat Himself.
Come on. That's not a good reason.
It's more obvious.
Obvious? What is the first 5 all about? Your relationship with
God.
God.
So it follows.
The second 5 is about your relationship with man. That's right. You don't need a God to tell you shouldn't kill somebody. There are some basic laws. There are societal laws. Only crazy people go and kidnap and they murder and they steal. No society could survive that way, although many of the countries today think it's a great idea. Yeah, right. We can't get political here. Yeah, right.
America.
It's such an obvious thing that God doesn't say, or else, because I'm God. No, because you're a mensch. You're a human being. You don't do that. It's so obvious, and you put it out, I think. It's so obvious, and in society, these are laws you have to follow, because how would you even think not to? And they say...
But Hashem designed the society. I mean, the generation of the flood.
Hashem also was there when Hammurabi made his code, and he has the same thing, not to murder, not that.
Who's
Hammurabi, it says it's written in he's found in Noach, but no, I'm sorry, it's one of the kings who fought against in Pasha Vayelach. But anyway,
There was Amrabi.
Amraphel is found. Amraphel is one of those four kings who, Amraphel was Hammurabi.
But he made a code.
He made a code. It's a very well-known code that was before the Aseret Dibur. And it's interesting sometimes just to see how what's common and what's not common. One of the things we learned tremendously, I found this fascinating when I learned about this, where the Code of Hammurabi states, for example, that if one kills another child, right? So his child is killed. And why do I say it's fascinating? Because we have in the Torah a pasuk that says that one who kills another. It says, and it says there that, however, it says, oh come on, man, it says that you kill the person and not the child. The opposite. So everybody asks, well, why? Of course not. Killing the person. In effect, one can say it was as a response to what seemed to have been a common thing in the ancient world. That's what they did. God says, no, we don't do that. So anyway, that's the Code of Hammurabi. I don't want to get into that, but I'm just really saying that. So the second part, the second Dibrot need know Hashem Elokecha here. This is something you have to know as a moral person. That's part of societal norms that any proper society. No, you cannot live in a society where you're just going to kill people and then steal from them. How do you can't live together. And if you can't live together, what good is it? So that's also very, very, very interesting. And let's see what else. May have other things about it. What I'm going to do, I'll skip a little bit. And if you'd like, and again, you have this Aseret HaDibrot. See if you find the differences. I think the most well-known is the one that we sing in L'cha Dodi. Right? Shamar v'zachor b'dibur echad. Right? The Aseret HaDibrot in Yitro starts the the story of the mitzvah of Shabbat with Zachor, whereas when quoting it in V'et Hanan, it says Shamor. So Chazal talk about the idea that there was a miracle that they could hear both Shamor and Zachor, one of those gaudy things that nobody else could do, and they heard both things and they would pronounce at the same time. That's what it says. Shamor v'Zachor. It should say Zachor v'Shamor, but since Shlomo Algebetz had written that poem of L'cha Dodi, he has to start with the shin, so he said Shamor v'Zachor. Both of these b'dibur echad, because Chazal said b'dibur echad ne'emru. They were said at the same time. And that's one approach. But you can say even at the same time as a pshat. Zachor and Shamor are not two different things. We have constantly in the Torah, it says, Ushmartem v'asitem. You have Zachor Yom HaShabbat, right? And then it says Shamor et Chodesh Aviv. It means Zachor et Chodesh Aviv, but the next time it says Shamor, because often Shamor and Zachor are synonymous. Okay, my time is up, unfortunately. A few other things, but I think I gave some ideas about the Aseret HaDibrot, a little different than what we ordinarily would have seen.
Also delineated the Aseret HaDibrot.